Hello, everybody. Welcome to this evening's webinar. I'm thrilled to have Dianna Mariana with us tonight to talk about dealing with mental stress. We've had a bunch of webinars since the middle of April, and ranging from all kinds of topics. Chris Snyder from the USOPC spoke in June about the future of coaching. One of my dear old friends from Australia, Tim McLaren, spoke in one of our first webinars. Five-time Olympic medal-winning rowing coach and also Olympic silver medal-winning athlete. He spoke about the fundamentals of coaching. Sarah McQuaid from the UK spoke to us on getting better at getting better, and former dietitian from the San Diego Chargers, Karen Freeman, one of our adjunct faculty, spoke on refueling. So we've got a couple of really cool webinars coming up. Madeline Barlow is going to talk about the art of listening and empathy next week. And then a buddy of mine from the UK is going to talk about this very interesting topic of assessing coaches. So Dianna, welcome, and thrilled you could be with us to talk about this topic of mental stresses in collegiate sport. We've had a number of great conversations about this topic, and not only as a former soccer player, but also a doctoral student. Thrilled to hear your insights on this topic. So Dianna's going to talk a little bit about what we mean when we talk about athlete wellness, some signs of athlete burnout, and also ways to overcome athlete burnout. So I'll hand over the screen share, Dianna, to you. And again, welcome, and thrilled you can be with us.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Dianna. As Cam said, that I am a doctoral student at Drexel. It's my second semester. I recently wrote a paper last semester on the mental stressors that female athletes undergo, and just specifically like all athletes as well. So this is just PowerPoint that I made. So a lot of people are confused on what exactly mental health is, and mental health is actually very broad. It encompasses things such as your cognitive, behavioral, and emotional well-being. So some people forget some of those essential components of mental health. It's the ability to be able to think and regulate your feelings. So being able to adapt to certain situations in a healthy manner. And they're all attributed to mental health, and it can either positively or negatively affect everyday life and relationships. So if you have positive mental health, you're going to have easier relationships and be able to navigate your life easier. The state of mental health implies that an individual has the ability to form and maintain affectionate relationships with others, to perform in the social roles usually played in their culture, and to manage, change, recognize, acknowledge, and communicate positive actions and thoughts, as well as to manage emotions such as sadness. So again, having positive mental health is just the ability to be able to regulate those emotions and keep those form those positive, open relationships. So a lot of the times individuals will experience a disruption in their mental health, and some of you may be wondering what exactly is a disruption of mental health. So it's when the individual can endure feelings of low self-esteem. So many times we will see this in athletes. I myself have experienced that throughout my years of playing soccer and then playing collegiate soccer as well. So feelings of low self-esteem, inability to manage time, so just feeling super overwhelmed. Student athletes have to balance their academics as well as their athletics, and that can, cause some turmoil within them. And the inability to cope with adversity. So, those issues of playing time or trying to compete for a spot on the team or trying to get more scholarship money. So those are all things that can kind of disrupt their mental health. Female collegiate athletes are faced with many challenges and hardships during their athletic experience. Therefore, having the proper tools and skills to maintain a positive mental health status, as well as the ability to regain control of a positive mental health status after sustaining a disruption, is imperative. So a lot of times athletes experience this disruption of mental health, and they're not really sure who to turn to, who to talk to, if they should talk to their coaches. So it's really important that we have tools that are available to them so that we can get them back on track. Experiencing a disturbance in the component of mental health can lead to mental illness and create further concerns. So if we don't get them that help and those tools, or teach them how to battle these mental health issues, it can lead to a lot of problems and a lot worse problems. Oops, sorry. So mental illness, I'm sure you've heard there's a stigma that's attached to it. So it's really important that we, get awareness out about mental health and the importance of it so that we can try and get the stigma away from it. So when we talk about wellness, there's a lot of different components. Something that I learned about in my undergrad was the wellness wheel. So pretty much if you think of like riding a bicycle, a wheel, has to be nice and firm. All those areas need to be nice and firm. If you have a hole in your emotional part of your bicycle, it's not going to roll as smoothly. So all those different parts, so we have emotional, physical, spiritual, intellectual, environmental, financial, and social. All those parts kind of feed off of each other. And if one is a little bit down, the other ones are going to be affected. So the wellness wheel allows us to examine different areas of our lives, and by making adjustments and changes, we can improve our overall health in many ways. We become happier and healthier, which can help us lead more fulfilling and enjoyable lives. When you experience a negative shift in a section of your wellness wheel, other sections will be affected as well. So again, if your emotional is down a little bit, it might affect your physical. If you're feeling self-conscious or having self-doubt and you're emotional, then you may not want to work out for your upcoming running test in your sport, which would then affect your physical. So that's just an example. Okay, so burnout. That's also a huge topic that can have to do with mental stress that athletes are experiencing. So burnout is the thought to be a result of the physical and emotional stress of training. Many athletes have some initial decrease in performance when they increase their level of training. Generally, however, after a short recovery period, the athlete will see an improvement in performance. Overtraining syndrome happens when an athlete fails to recover adequately from training and competition. The symptoms are due to a combination of changes in hormones, suppression of the immune system, which decreases the athlete's ability to fight infection, physical fatigue, and physiological changes. So this is something important for us coaches, I coach as well, to look out for. We don't want to overtrain our athletes. Sometimes we think, the longer the practices or the more intensive practices or the more frequency of the practices will make our athletes better, when in turn it can actually cause burnout, which is going to give us, the negative effects. And sometimes we don't realize that we're burning out our athletes. So then we continue to increase those practices and our athletes keep declining with performance. So that's something we really need to look out for. So some risk factors of athlete burnout is specializing in one sport, especially at a young age. We want to make sure that our athletes are exposed to other sports. Sudden and large increases in training. So again, just monitoring the amount of training that we're doing with our athletes. Participation in endurance sports. So again, running those athletes into the ground, like for cross country, just keeping an eye on that. High anxiety levels. So really stressing our athletes out, making sure that they're okay, checking in with them to see if, they're doing okay with their social lives, their academic lives, their spiritual lives, like that wellness wheel, kind of checking in on all those components just to make sure that they are able to manage that anxiety. Low self-esteem. So, I like to, when I teach and when I coach, is do the compliment sandwich. So kind of give that your athlete a compliment, give them something to work on in the middle, and then give them another compliment so that they don't just get that negative feedback. It's more of constructive feedback. And then pressure from parents and coaches. So again, just trying to help athletes navigate that pressure from parents and coaches. So look at how you're speaking to your athletes. Make sure your facial expressions and things like that are matching up with what you're saying to them. So some different warning signs of athlete burnout, they can come in different forms. So chronic muscle and joint pain, weight loss and loss of appetite if they're depressed, increased heart rate at rest because they might have a lot of anxiety, decreased sports performance. So we talked about that a few slides ago. When we increase the amount of practices or the endurance, we might get a negative outcome. Fatigue, they might just be totally exhausted from all the effort that they're putting in. Prolonged recovery times, not recovering, lack of enthusiasm. You might see a change in the way that they approach practice or approach a game. They might not be as excited to take the field or the court. Frequent illnesses. So if they're constantly sick, we talked about a few slides ago, their immune system breaking down just because they're so defeated. So just keeping an eye on their physical health. Difficulty completing usual routines. So maybe you have a specific warm-up or a specific run test or specific drills and skills that you do, and maybe they're really struggling with them. So that's something to look out for. Decreased school performance. So not achieving the same grades, like there's a drastic change in that. Personality or mood changes. So just watching the way that they interact with other teammates as well as yourself. We have increased anger or irritation and sleep disturbances. So if they're not getting enough sleep. So there's a few different ways on how to overcome athlete burnout. These are not all the ways. I'm sure that there are other ways out, but these are just some that I found. So giving them rest. So if you think that your athlete is going to burn out or is approaching burnout, just give them some time off. The athlete should stop participation in training or competition for a set time period. So usually the time period is around 4 to 12 weeks, depending on several factors, including the type of sport, level of skill, and competition and severity of the symptoms. So I know that might be hard if you are in full swing of season, but if you can try and monitor that, or it might not need to be 4 straight weeks, maybe giving them off a practice a week, or limiting study hall hours, or it could even be limiting training hours, anything that you can do just to ease off their anxiety a little bit. During the rest period, the athlete can participate in short intervals of low intensity aerobic exercise to help keep active and fit. This type of activity should be unrelated to his or her sport. So maybe finding something that they enjoy that relates to your sport, but isn't specifically your sport. So when the signs and symptoms of burnout have resolved completely, including physical symptoms, mood changes, sleep disturbances, etc., the athlete may begin to slowly reintroduce to training. Athletes should increase the duration of the activity before increasing the intensity of the activity. And then just keep an eye on the symptoms, if they increase, if they decrease, and just make sure you're monitoring that and adjusting as you need to be. So it's easier to avoid the burnout than having to try and deal with recovering from the burnout. So it's really important to give your athletes rest. So spend 1 to 2 days per week resting from the organized sport, or at least alternate activities, allowing slightly longer breaks, maybe a couple weeks from training and competition every 3 months, again, so these athletes are not beat to the ground. This time could be spent focusing on other activities and cross-training without intensive training or competition. So including the cross-training, so for example, if you play soccer, and maybe introduce some sort of different strength training or yoga or Pilates, biking, something different that kind of breaks up, soccer all the time. Maintain a healthy, balanced diet and drink plenty of water. Listen to your body, take a short break or alter your training if your body needs a change, and try to be a well-rounded athlete who participates in many different activities. So just trying to get involved as many things as you can. These are just some quick facts that I used for my paper last semester. I actually read a book called What Makes Maddie Run. I'm not sure if any of you have read that. It's about a girl who goes to UPenn, and she was kind of like the all-American girl in high school, and then went to UPenn and was just completely overwhelmed with running and school that she took her own life. So I read a bunch of articles based on that book, and I was able to pull some statistics. So 1/3 of women student athletes have mental health problems. So that is a lot. Whether that goes reported or unreported, that's still a lot of individuals. about 30% of surveyed female student athletes showed signs of depression. Again, that's really high. And those are the ones who were able to mark on the paper that they were showing signs of depression. I'm sure that there are other ones who are a little bit scared to come forward because they may think that their playing time is going to be affected. Their coach, they may think their coach is going to look at them differently, or their teammates. So a lot of times athletes are nervous to come forward and say, hey, I'm having an issue. I need some help. Depression is a huge component of mental health and is a colossal part of why female athletes tend to burn out before completing their entire athletic career in college. So again, we really need to figure out why they're getting so depressed and how can we fix that before it becomes an issue. People tend to not realize that mental illness is not a choice. Thinking positively or trying to smile more will not cure depression or anxiety. It's much deeper and more complex than that. So I thought that was like one of my favorite quotes because sometimes we think that cracking a joke at practice or trying to make practice fun will decrease that depression or anxiety. And that might be a quick fix for just that hour of practice. But it's actually more issues are going on. They're deeper than just that 1 hour practice. So I'm pretty sure, I'm pretty sure that's all I got.
Awesome, Dianna. And I think there's a lot of really great high level principles there that no matter what level you're involved with sport, I think that there's just so many great takeaways there. One of the questions that came through relates to the uncertainty that everybody's facing right now, and I'm curious your thoughts on how athletes can manage the uncertainty of what appears for most is a 2020 season that's gone away, and just what are some things that people can do, particularly from training from home.
So I actually just read an article on that about an athletic trainer who was concerned about all those athletes, because I know a lot of athletes now have no fall season, and some of them have been pushed back to spring. Some of them don't know what's happening. And a big issue that we're dealing with is there's not enough counselors to help these kids get through these tough times. So a lot of them were already stressed about the season coming up and have been busting their butts all summer. And now they're hearing that they don't have a season, and what happens to my scholarship? Am I going to get another year of eligibility? So I think that's really hard. I'm not in their shoes, so I can't even imagine how they feel. But I think just trying to have them think about the positives of why did they cancel my season? To keep you safe, to keep you healthy. And just trying to focus on the future, like, oh, this gives me, my season is canceled, but this gives me a little bit more time to maybe work on my overall wellness, maybe dive into some of those other parts of my life, or maybe it gives me a little bit more time to get my grades up, or it gives me a little bit more time. Maybe I'm a soccer player, my left foot isn't as good as my right foot. So now I have a few months to develop that left foot. So I think just trying to sit down and take a deep breath, and maybe even just make a list of all the positives of, this stinks, my season got canceled, but what positive takeaways can I get from this situation?
Yeah, I think there's so much good stuff there. And you mentioned it in one of your slides there about rest. And I think rest is one of those really tricky concepts, particularly for the more highly motivated athlete. Particularly those that are they've got other jobs, or they're studying, or they're doing other things. And when we say to an athlete, you've got the whole day off tomorrow, and that athlete might be working or might be on their feet the whole time. So that idea of how you define what rest actually is such an important piece in the sort of cumulative conversation. Can you talk a little bit more about the difference between training hard and overtraining?
So I think this is something I've always struggled with. So overtraining is just when you're totally beating your body into the ground. I think it gets to the point where, you have to work out, but you literally are dreading it and dreading it and dreading it. And then I think working hard is you may have some aches and pains, but you still want to go out there and you still want to keep working hard. And you're seeing the benefits and you're healthy. I think when you're overtraining comes those injuries. Like you're not sore, you actually have an injury, and then you're just making it worse by continuing that overtraining. And I feel like with overtraining, it just kind of affects all those things we were talking about with the wellness wheel. Like you're just completely depleted physically, emotionally, mentally, and then just working hard. I think you're still like in the game, you still are mentally okay. Your body feels, like I said, feels okay. You might have those pains, but you're not actually injured or hurt.
What about some tests? What are some warning signs? I know you mentioned the risk factors, but Rose and Michelle asked a question of what's some tests that you could recommend just to sort of get ahead of it, because there's another question about prevention. What can we do to sort of make sure that this thing doesn't get too far down the track along the way of training?
I think having a good relationship with the athletic trainers, they are the ones who are seeing our athletes every day. And I think getting their input, they should be at your practices, at least at the collegiate at the collegiate level, they should be at your practices. So they are seeing what you are doing. So, talking to them and being like, maybe running your practice plans by them and saying, okay, this is my plan for this day, and then we're gonna have a rest day here, and then I'm gonna push them a little bit harder here. What are your thoughts? What have the girls said to you? Because most likely the girls or the players are never gonna come up to you and say, hey coach, like I'm super sore, like I need a day. They're most likely not gonna do that. Some may. But the athletic trainers may hear some stuff that the athletes are saying to each other in the training room. I also read, I had to do a huge APA citation paper, and I just read an article that said about putting counselors into the actual training room, which I never thought of that before. And I think that's a really good way on how to navigate some of this stuff that the athletes are going through, is having a counselor right there. Because many of the articles I read are saying that the counselors are not available to these athletes. There's way too many athletes for the amount of counselors that we have. So actually having like the counselor right there, even have him or her come to the practice, see what's going on, and really having that good relationship with the athletic trainer, so that she can monitor he can monitor what you're doing as well.
Yeah, I've heard this idea of an athlete wellness officer, of somebody that's specifically their responsibility is to not necessarily be a therapist or a psychologist, but really be mindful of how our athletes are handling, just the whole balance. It's not just the sport component, but life. Good question here from Christina in terms of we had a really interesting webinar probably about a month ago. Ken Mosek, he did his doctoral dissertation on coach burnout and coach wellness. What are your thoughts on the principles and the concepts here transferring over to coaching?
So sorry, I read a lot of articles recently, but there was an article that actually read that like the way the coach takes the field and what he or she does and how he or she presents herself can actually like trickle down to the kids. So if the coach is like burnt out, or you can see that he or she doesn't want to be there, the kids actually read up on it and they get the similar feelings. So I think for coaching, it's pretty similar. We're out there every day, busting our butts, trying to make drills and skills and all these things that are fun for our athletes. So I think the best way to not have burnout is giving us rest as well, giving us, our minds, a break, our bodies a break from coaching, and also trying to make it fun for us. I know when I coach, I try and make practice as fun as possible, because I don't want to stand there and be bored. And if I'm bored, I know my girls are bored. So just trying to plan ahead and be just creative with it, I think.
Yeah. No, I think, and Ken talked about that a lot as well, just in terms of self-care. Do you actually schedule the time to have time off? Do you schedule the time to do a workout? And I think, from a coaching perspective, it's that endless wheel of you just pick up and there's no beginning or ending. It's an endless cycle. Just changing to speed again, in terms of new athletes and particularly high school and collegiate freshmen coming into new programs, how do you see, that transition happening in a smooth way, particularly in a time now where, like things are just stranger than ever. You know,
Yeah.
there's so many different triggers to stress. So what about incoming freshmen? What have you seen in terms of helpful strategies to help freshmen make the transition?
Things we've done in the past is we really do the like team sisters. Since I coach girls, we call it like team sisters, where we have an upperclassman team up with a freshman, and it kind of just like builds a really good relationship between upperclassmen and lowerclassmen. They're able to give them like insight into what's going on. I think just a lot of team bonding activities. For example, besides coaching like in person this past summer, we were allowed to start last Monday. Throughout the summer, we were also allowed to have virtual sessions. So even if it had nothing to do with soccer, just creating those relationships, because when you create those positive, open communication relationships, it's going to make the transition easier. We've also done leadership groups too, which I would think would help with the burnout as well. We kind of made a group that the girls voted people in based on specific qualities that we listed, and they formed a group, and they would meet with the coaches twice a week to bring issues that were going on with the team, whether it was, coach, you're pushing us too hard, or coach, we need a day off, or coach, so-and-so is having an issue with so-and-so, so don't pair them up during, practice. So that was a good way to navigate some of the issues too, as well as create like a stronger bond within the team, because I felt like the leadership group was able to voice their opinions because they were a group and it wasn't just one or two girls coming to us. It was a group of, we voted like all different age groups in, so that it would be a little bit diverse and they could bring issues from different age groups. So that was another thing that I thought worked really well.
How about demographic factors? It was a good question here about stresses based on demographics, and what about first generation athletes? Have you seen anything there, or any sort of predictors in terms of demographic factors?
I mean, I necessarily didn't ever thought about it, to be completely honest. But I mean, I think everyone, just across the board, everyone comes with their own issues. Whether it's physical, mental, their background, what they look like, if they've had experience, the level they've played at, the support they get from home, the environment they've grown up. So I think that just everyone comes with their own issues, whether they're good, whether they're bad, they come with their own experiences. And I think that just like creating a positive, open environment and getting to know each and every one of your players is just super important, so you can create that relationship, so oh, hey, so-and-so is going home to a bad home environment, like how can I help him or her navigate those issues so that she doesn't have anxiety about going home. So I think just creating those relationships. I know I teach high school special ed, and I know that like going out of my way to involve myself in my kids' lives has made a big difference, whether it's me going to watch them play in the band or watch them play a football game or showing up at a dance recital, just getting involved in their overall life rather than just the life that I have direct contact with them, is just a great way to create that relationship and hopefully create trust, and just make it a lot easier and on them, hopefully.
And a lot of what you talk about there is related to culture and the environment that you set up. What about resources? You mentioned the book, What Made Maddie Run, and I was going to put that in the chat here for people that want to check that out. Tell us a little bit about that, and then what sparked you to dive into that book, and then any other resources that you want to share with people.
Okay, sure. I felt like it related to me a lot. So I play collegiate soccer. I originally went to University of South Florida. I was drawn in by the palm trees, the pool, the sun. All the facilities were brand new. And I was just like, oh my God, this looks like a vacation spot. This looks great. I'm going. That's it. And my parents were really pushing me towards the University of Delaware, which is a great school, but when I went and looked at their campus, it looked nothing like USF. So I went, the 11th grade me went with USF. So comes maybe the end of September, I wanted out. I could not stand USF. I was having the hardest time. I cried every day before going to practice. I was absolutely miserable. I never saw my parents. It was a culture shock. Just every issue I felt like that could happen was happening to me. And I just could not believe it was, since I played soccer since I was 4. I was in love with it. And I just couldn't understand how I could love something so much and now absolutely hate it. So then I transferred to University of Delaware, and I had so much anxiety. I remember the summer before going, because I was so petrified that my experience at USF was going to carry over into Delaware. But I worked my butt off, and I made sure that history did not repeat itself. I refused to sit on the bench. I refused to have anybody tell me I'm not good enough, or I'm not fast enough, I'm not fit enough, whatever. I worked really hard, and I had the best 4 years of my life. So I just know, when I read Maddie's book, she was kind of your all-around kid in high school, smart, very athletic. When you read it, she actually got a offer from Lehigh for soccer. And she loved soccer, and then she started running track in high school, and, won all these awards and beat all these times that she needed to beat. And then she had her heart set on UPenn. So she ended up declining her verbal commitment from Lehigh and went to UPenn, and was just running herself into the ground. She would just run after practice. She was totally overtraining herself, burning herself out. And she just ended up like hating track, and that dislike for track just kind of affected the whole rest of her life. Like, she wasn't going out, she really wasn't seeing friends anymore. She lost a ton of weight. She went home for like Thanksgiving. I think it was either Thanksgiving or Christmas break. A lot of her friends were saying that they loved their schools, and she couldn't understand why she didn't like her school. She was completely stressed out. Her parents were beyond worried. She had issues trying to get in to see the counselor because there was such a long line to get in. So again, that comes to our issue of not enough counselors or support or tools for our athletes. And she just came to the point where she literally said, I cannot do this anymore. I cannot live like this. And she ended up taking her own life. So I think it's scary because, like I said, I felt some of the same things that she felt when I read her book, that I felt at USF. And I know that I'm not the only person that feels that way based on research I've done, based on the book that I read. So it's very scary that those feelings can get to that point of someone taking their life. Luckily for me, I got out. But that doesn't happen for everyone. Not everyone gets out. So.
Yeah, such an important topic, and probably more so now than ever before. And I think the interesting thing, in some of the research, is this idea of play, of not only the concept of fun. I think so many people associate play and fun together, but there's this balance. You know what it's like when we're kids and we're playing. That, the best person has to put one hand behind their back, and the person that's the worst gets to start with the ball, or whatever the rules that we make up. And I think that concept of how can we maintain challenge but also maintain the fun balance is an essential part of all of this. Another really interesting question, which I think connects with what you're mentioning here, is what do you think's the one major cause, or what's the major trigger to stress? Because stress, as we know, is an important part of what we do. Without stress, we don't grow, we don't learn, we don't expand. But what takes it to that point where it does actually become negative?
I think it kind of gets to that point when you have tried everything in your ability to try and overcome that stress, and you just cannot get over it. And I think that comes to, like in Maddie's book, there was no support there. I mean, she had her family support. If you read, she had her coach's support, where he actually told her that she didn't have to come to every meet or every practice. She tried to quit track, and he was like, oh, well, I don't want you to quit, so why don't you lessen up what you're doing, which sounded great on paper, but that's not what she wanted. That's not what she needed. So I just think that it gets to that point when our athletes just don't see a way out. They don't have that support. They don't know who to turn to. I know when I was at USF, I didn't speak to a counselor. I didn't speak to anyone. I would call my parents, who are 24 hours away from me. It's not like they could get in the car and hop down. And I isolated myself, so I didn't really have many friends on my soccer team because I was so depressed. So I think it just gets to that that area when we just can't take it anymore. And I think just creating awareness around mental health, and just really, really getting those supports and those tools in. Like, a counselor is great, but what else can we add to that to help these athletes? So coaches are able to identify, some of the mental health issues that are going on with our athletes. They work with our athletes all the time. So like athletic trainers, teammates, coaches, professors see our kids every day. So all those people need to be educated on, okay, I'm just going to use the name Ashley. Ashley has totally changed this past month. These are maybe even filling out some sort of form. I know that might be a headache, but I don't know what the answer is. But these are the stressors that I see Ashley's dealing with. This is what's changed. And then, kind of going from there and coming up with some sort of plan to help her, because again, these athletes are afraid to come forward. I know I was afraid to come forward. I didn't want anyone to think any less of me. I didn't want to lose my scholarship. We're kids. We don't, athletes are kids. They don't know what's going on. It's a lot of change. You're uprooting your entire life and then going into college. If you get a scholarship, or your coaches tell you, oh, you're going to start, you're going to play, you're going to be a captain, this and that, and then you get into that situation and none of that's happening. That just creates overwhelming stress beyond the fact of you're away from your family, your friends. You're now in all of these lecture halls that are 500 kids, whereas you're used to your 20 kid classroom. So just all these things come into play, and I just think athletes get really lost, and they just don't know who to turn to.
Yeah, there's two things I want to pull out of that, because again, lots of really good stuff. One is how critical awareness is, but the second piece there, and you just touched on it in terms of surveys. With our mobile phones, with our email and social media, and even just the general connectedness that we have, even something as simple as like a morning check-in of how do you feel today, and just it could be a smiley face, a plain face, and a frown, but just something as simple as just a daily check-in, which I can remember one of the first times I asked that question of what can I do. Some advice to me was just really listen when you ask the question. When you ask the question, how are you, to your athletes, are you really listening to what they're saying? And I thought that was such powerful advice, because we don't have to make it super complicated, but at the same time we can really overthink this thing. In terms of the way you approach coaching, do you do any skill building or any sort of how to deal with stressful situations, whether it's breathing skills, visualization, anything like that with the
I try to check in with my kids all the time, to say, like you said, how are you feeling? But I do it more in a verbal sense. And I rely on my leadership group to kind of talk to different girls, because like they may be afraid to tell me really what's going on. We do different things, such as like doing yoga days where we'll bring in a yoga instructor and we'll do some yoga just to get their mind off of soccer or whatever may be bothering them. We do sometimes I have practices that have nothing to do with soccer. I set up like a field day one day for my girls, and they had so much fun, and we actually had a game the next day, but it was such a rough week. I had a ton of injuries. We were getting beaten into the ground by some of these teams. And I said, it doesn't matter if I have a 3-hour practice, a 1-hour practice, if I run these girls into the ground, if I yell at them, none of that's going to work. Like, it's not going to make a difference. These girls need some sort of fun. They need to relieve that stress. So we had a field day, the day before a game, and they came out awesome the next day. They were relaxed. Their mind was off soccer. They weren't worrying about who we were playing. And they just were like almost refreshed. So I think like incorporating days like that, that are strictly just fun and just get them away from all those outside factors. They're at the age where they have a boyfriend or a girlfriend or a significant other, which that's stress. They have the stress of academics. They have the stress of mom and dad breathing down their throat. They have the stress of, whatever's going on in their family or their professors or their academics and what coach thinks of me. So having days like that where they can literally just block it all out and have a good time, I think is just super important.
Yeah, there's the reoccurring theme again: having a good time, having fun, playing the sport that we all fell in love with. Um, in terms of I think again you've covered so much good territory here. There's that fine line, right, between coaching and reaching out for help from other professionals. What's your advice in terms of, when you do see an issue, when do you find it's important to reach out to, either somebody else, whether it's, a parent or, a fellow teammate or actually a professional? What are some of those, that grey area of when does a coach actually step in, or when do you step back and go, that's not my business?
I think that's a tough question because each kid's going to be different and show different kind of signs. So again, I think just having that conversation with them, and I think if you're getting specific symptoms and specific responses over like maybe a week or course of time, because I mean every kid has a bad day. I have a bad day. We all have bad days. So we might just be in a really negative mood one day, and you might jump the gun. But I think if you can see like a pattern in the behaviors, I think that's when you need to get someone else involved. I'm just a coach. I'm not certified to deal with a lot of the issues. So I think that if I notice something, like I said, like a pattern over a course of time, it's really important to reach out and not ignore those things. It is better to jump the gun than ignore it, I would say. So if you're a little confused on where to go, like, oh, is Caitlin just having a bad week? I don't know. It might just be better to reach out to mom or dad and say, hey, this is what I've noticed going on. These are the behaviors I'm seeing. Is something going on at home? Something going on at school? Have you seen these behaviors? Have you noticed any changes? Like, has she said anything to you about how soccer or whatever your sport is? What do you think I can do to help her? If they tell you what the problem is, ask them like, what usually calms her down, or what helps her deal with this issue? Can you give me any advice? So I think like teaming up with different people. You could also reach out to, their professors or their teachers and say, listen, this is what I'm seeing from Caitlin at practice. Is she doing this in class? Has her grades changed? Have you noticed anything? Are there different relationships going on in school? So I think, they say it takes a village to raise a kid. So I think reaching out to those different aspects of that kid's life and connecting with them so that you guys can like formulate a decision on what to do next.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate it, Dianna. I think this is it's such an important and timely topic, and I know this is just the beginning in many respects in terms of your navigation on this topic. You've covered so much, not only as an athlete, as a coach, but getting further into the research. I think there's so much more opportunity. So, hey, I really appreciate your time and everything you've shared. I don't know if anyone else has any final questions, but yeah, just wanted to say thanks and really appreciate it. This has been fabulous.
Thank you for having me.
All right, very good.